moved, you go over to Ghent, G-H-E-N-T, and you see this thing which is probably the most significant work created in the 15th century in northern Europe. It's kind of the northern equivalent of the Sistine Chapel ceiling. I mean, not anything to do with style or subject matter, but just the complexity, the beauty, everything sort of rolled into one. Because in fact, I showed you this briefly yesterday, on Monday, it's many pictures all cobbled together. This is a polyptych, because we've had a diptych. Remember the Wilton diptych was just two pieces folded together. A triptych, which is like the Meyerhold altarpiece with the two wings that fold over. A polyptych is just many ptyches. Actually, a ptych is a fold, so technically the Wilton diptych was a uniptych. It's only got one fold. Oh, well, all right, we won't get into that. But the thing is that this is what it looks like when it's open, and I said usually these altarpieces were closed up, except on special days. So that's the open one, and that's the closed one. And it's in this cathedral in Ghent, which has been sort of used to be dedicated to John the Baptist, then a local saint called Saint Bavo, B-A-V-O. And it's quite, I mean, Ghent is really a rather glamorous city in some ways. It's rather nice. It's, again, worth an outing to go and see it. The Ghent altarpiece was actually painted, we don't know exactly when, it's about 1425, and it was finished in 1432. So it probably took about 7 or 8 years to paint. And again, you think nowadays, how many people would have the time or the money to expend? But there's a total different conception of time back then. I mean, you just kept on going till you got it right. And there was no real deadline to have it done by next Tuesday, speed it up. This is time-consuming and perfect in so many ways. The size of it is, well, it's about 11.5 by just over 15 feet, which is about 3.5 by 4.6 meters. That's big. Now, the trouble is nowadays, they've messed it around. It used to be in a chapel. And in fact, I'll forget to mention it, so I'll just say it right now. See shadows, whoa. Good shadow, and then the shadows are working within the picture. See all these figures in the bottom row there, throwing back shadows. It's as if the light was coming from the actual window of the chapel, which adds up to the little bit of extra realism, if you like. So it used to look a bit like that, and you can see the extraordinary sort of tabernacle on top of it, and then the way that it's framed there. Somebody else came and painted at another point. I think that's supposed to be Dürer, who we'll get to later, of course, sort of 19th century romanticism. Dürer showing up to say hello. And then somebody else just flitting around there. But again, a different kind of frame. I've seen it about 3 or 4 times. They moved it out of that chapel. And when it was in there, you see, what you had to do was you had to wait for the guy to come along and open and close it, which he did 6 times a day or something. And if you'd gone off for a pee or a cup of tea or something, you just had to put up with whatever was there. Anyway, then they moved it into this little tiny ex-baptismal chapel. And it was squished in space. There were always about 3 groups with the guys screaming to be heard above the other ones. You couldn't stand back. This is an old slide that I took of it, so it's all just kind of gone discolored. But it was so close up to the wall, and they never opened or closed it. They just left it like this. And there was about a foot space behind it, so you could go squeezing along behind, trying desperately to sort of look up above you to see some of the stuff. And if you met somebody coming the other way, then big arguments about who was going to back up. It was dreadful. And it's no better, I don't know if it's going to be any better soon, because when I was there a couple of years ago, in fact, they've taken the whole bloody thing apart, and they're cleaning. Actually, it's a guy from Queens who's sort of in charge of, I don't know if that's him or not. Maybe that's him. Because they're all sitting there with their computers, and that's all the bits and pieces, and other bits and pieces were over there just sort of lying around. So eventually, I'm not sure, by now it might be all back together and put it, but I bet they'll put it back in the little skinny chapel, which is much too small. So you totally lost the context. Within the chapel itself, though, they have a big copy, which isn't bad, and it's sort of life-size, so you can talk about it and get the a little bit of a sense of it. Somebody else took these pictures, and that's very fuzzy just to show where it's closed up on the outside. But anyway, I mean, that's the problem of location. It's not right, but I don't know why they can put it right. I would put it in the middle of the aisle of the, because that's why people go to Ghent, is to see this picture. Put it in the middle of the church, let people walk all around it, and just treat it like a work of art, not like a religious icon, basically. But anyway, apart from anything else, it's had a very exciting life, the Ghent altarpiece, because that doesn't really affect this course that much, but in the early 16th century you get the Protestant Reformation, Martin Luther, the break from Rome, basically. And the worst thing that the Protestants did, because the Protestants believed in the second commandment, thou shalt not worship graven images. And so they went around destroying any work of religious art they could find. And it was absolutely disgusting. It's unforgivable. There's sort of this narrow-minded, kill it. Because, again, the idea was that you were worshipping the picture, the painting, the sculpture, whatever, rather than the idea represented in that picture. So they destroyed so much that luckily the Ghent altarpiece was basically hidden away. I think up in just in the tower of the church it was saved. Napoleon came along. And Napoleon was the greatest looter of all time, and it's almost a pity that he lost the Battle of Waterloo, because otherwise you wouldn't have to go to Ghent, you could just go to Paris, because he had everything there. You wouldn't believe the amount of stuff he took there. But anyway, 1815, they had to give it all back. But the only bits that he took were the middle part here, this thing called the Deesis, which I'll show you in a second, D-E-E-S-I-S, where you have Christ with Mary and John the Baptist. And the bottom bit is often called the Adoration of the Lamb, because there's the Lamb on the altar there. Sometimes the whole altarpiece is called the Adoration of the Lamb. So anyway, he's got that bit. He's got to give the other bits, like Adam and Eve, who are at the edges here. They were moved over to Brussels for a while. There was a bishop who was a little bit short of cash, so he would sell off bits and pieces. And anyway, miraculously, most of what we have. There's actually one piece which is a copy. I won't tell you yet. That's a surprise. Somebody stole one of the panels and they never got it back. So, anyway, I mean, it's really quite extraordinary. During the war, there was a good program on the television. It was called The Rape of Europa. And it was all about art treasures and what happened during the war and where they went. And a lot of great art by the Germans and put into salt mines and were buried up deep underground. And these salt mines almost flooded. And I don't know quite exactly how they were saved. I mean, tens of thousands of the most important pictures were almost lost overnight, basically. Anyway, now it comes back into Ghent and it's been reinstated. But very, very quickly, I mean, even some of the things, those sort of images like that, become sort of a place of pilgrimage. As I say, that's why you go to Ghent, is to see this extraordinary thing. And it's partly its sheer size. As I say, it's 3.5 meters high, 4.5 meters wide or so. I mean, it's just stunning to see the real thing. But it's also the complexity of the subject matter. And again, that kind of, in a way, compares to the Sistine Chapel ceiling. But being Van Eyck, it's also the stunning technique. Sistine ceiling, of course, is fresco. And you don't go there to look at colour and everything. You go there to look at the ideas. Because this is the best of the best of oil painting with all of the glowing colours. And again, the intensity of the original, the colours really have not changed, I think, since the day it was done. Van Eyck has this uncanny ability to combine the monumental, big images, big ideas, everything, with the miniaturistic, without somehow one clashing with the other. You can see at the foot of God / Christ, there's a crown on the floor in front of it. That crown is about a foot high. So that little picture I showed you of the Madonna in the church, that would be about that big there. And you remember all the tiny details in that. So anyway, the problems, two main problems. First of all, the original format. Because now it's just in this rather sort of simple outlining sort of frame, and sort of a couple of those other ones earlier on. There have been attempts to reconstruct what it might have looked like originally. One art historian came up with this idea for, again, think back to those 19th century paintings, something very elaborate. The trouble I have with this is that how the hell do you keep opening it and closing it, folding it, because you've got these big sort of buttresses in between. So that's not going to work somehow. But it was probably something pretty damn grandiose. The other serious problem, which people get terribly excited about, is who painted what. And I already showed you that kind of grey and Jan van Eyck. The whole issue is complicated, though, by an inscription which was on the original frame. Not there now. But somebody copied it down, and it was in Latin, but in translation it says, "The painter Hubert van Eyck, greater than whom none was to be found, began this work, and his brother Jan, second in art, completed the weighty task at the request of Jodocus Veit." That's the chap. That's Jodocus Veit there. He paid for it. On the 6th of May, 1432. So again, that's when it was finished and dedicated. He, Jodocus Veit, begs you by means of this verse, what I'm reading, to take care of what has come into being. In other words, look after the picture. And look after my immortal soul. That was the basic idea there. So that led to sort of furious arguments about who did what. What's by Hubert, what's by Jan? I mean, Jan died in 1426, pretty early on in this whole process, so maybe he got the thing going and then dropped dead. And because we'll see there's quite broad distinctions of style and skill even. The less of it's given to him, the more innovative, the more naturalistic areas are given to Jan. So I think then Hubert could have done the overall design, and then basically Jan finishes everything off after he got back from Spain and Portugal. It's also been suggested that Hubert only did the frame, all of this amazing stuff that might have been there, which might, again, it almost certainly was absolutely magnificent, sort of a work of art in its own right. So play a little bit of game, because in that inscription, the word painter, pictor, they think that whoever copied it down might have meant mistaken it for fictor, the maker, the sculptor basically, or the builder, I guess you could almost say. And in fact, at this time, being a sculptor was slightly more prestigious than being a painter. Jan in the inscription is described as being arte secundus, second in art, but it could just mean that he was the younger brother, younger than Hubert. So again, it all gets a little bit complex. But certainly, we'll talk about the arrangement of everything a little bit. The outside, when the wings are folded, does appear to be a little bit more unified. And what we see here, and this is generally all given to Jan van Eyck. But even that I would question slightly, but who cares? So what we're going to here are prophets and sibyls. Even that is like the Sistine Chapel, because if you know, there are huge figures on the Sistine Chapel of Isaiah and people like that, and Delphic sibyls. Sibyls were female equivalents of Old Testament prophets, and they lived in Delphi and Libya and places like that. So they're up there kind of supervising everything. Below that, just try and zoom in on this one a bit, is the Annunciation, which we've already seen 63 times. So we've got Gabriel and Mary, same inscription, hello Mary, same reply upside down, same idea, we're obviously very high up. We're looking at over the rooftops almost. Very similar to the compound they wrote altarpiece, the washing and scrubbing stuff there, which again is, well, a Christian can never see water without thinking of baptism, which is the first ritual, first of the seven sacraments. Without baptism, the Christian soul cannot develop any further. So anytime you see anything to do with washing and scrubbing, it's spiritual scrubbing as well as physical scrubbing. Obviously the figures here cannot stand up. I mean, if he stands up, he's going to have an awful headache. In fact, originally they've done x-rays, the arches, sort of more rounded arches than it is here. But the figure has been much rounded a bit. And again, don't forget the shadow that kind of reflects the real spaces of the chapel. And so Gabriel is one of the much more simplified, it's still big, and you can't have all that amazing amount of jewelry and everything else. Very, very heavy folds of the robe, gazing across, Mary, a little bit, I would say, co-faced, with a slightly odd-looking dove of the Holy Spirit